following is a fan-based video review under fair use. The King Kong musicals are all owned by Global Creatures, Malborne Theatre Productions, Broadway Theatre Productions, Playbill, Daniel Kramer, and Drew McOine. Please support the official releases.
Will be up in lights on Broadway. Kong, the eighth wonder of
the world! Well, it looks like life finally imitated art. Oh, hey guys! Welcome back to the King Kong review series, and do I even need to explain why I'm here in Manhattan today? Yes, it was only a matter of time for me to cover this show, and it's been a long time coming, honestly. The reasons for it are mostly due to costs and finding time to see the show, whether it be live or online. But for the season finale, I figured this would be a good way to cap off the year. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to show you the greatest thing your eyes have ever beheld. He was a king and a god in the motion picture world, he knew, but now he comes before you to Broadway. Merely a puppet, an animatronic to gratify your curiosity. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you King Kong, alive on Broadway.
You motherfucking son of a bitch, what the fuck?
The story this time is very similar to the classic tale, as we are introduced to a cold yet lavish New York City in 1931 and meet a girl with a dream of making it big named Ann Darrow, played by Christiani Pitts. But given she's a woman of color, the 1930s society are not too kind to her. But all that changes when a larger-than-life showman, Carl Denham, played by Eric Williams Morris, sees the star quality of the young actress and offers her the thrill of a lifetime on a long sea voyage. As they board the SS Wanderer, yeah, this one's based on the public domain novelization, Anne is acquainted with the crew as they arrive on an uncharted island. The crew find the island to become one of mystery and wonder, as Anne is then captured by a giant 25-foot ape known as Kong. Denham pursues the ape in order to save Anne. However, Anne sees sympathy in Kong and the two form a strong bond for one another. Anne escapes and Denham captures Kong, taking him back to New York to be displayed in a wondrous stage show. However, as always, Kong escapes and runs amok across the city, and Anne manages to keep him calm as he climbs the Empire State Building. But as the tale goes, Kong is shot down by airplanes and meets his demise in the streets below. So, as far as the story goes, this one is pretty much the same as most incarnations. But how does the classic Kong tale do in a lavish Broadway musical stage production? Well, honestly, from my perspective, it achieves two things. For one, this show is very much a visual experience, as Kong should be, and as for the story, it actually gives a new take on things, and in some respects breaks away from the King Kong formula that we as an audience are accustomed to. But before diving into the details, let's look at a little history with how the classic film became a reality. Well, I'd say we start off with, of all things, the Walking with Dinosaurs franchise.
Dinosaur, eh? Yes, Jack. A prehistoric beast.
Back in 1999, the miniseries aired on BBC in the Discovery Channel and was a worldwide phenomenon. So much that there were spin-offs, a feature film that we must never mention because it sucks 65-million-year-old shit, and a live arena show featuring state-of-the-art animatronic dinosaurs. Having seen the show twice, the animatronics were incredible and honestly some of the best I've ever seen, up to the quality of Stan Winston's work in Jurassic Park. And given most animatronic dinosaurs I've seen up close, that's saying a lot. I mean, some of them are stiff, move like mannequins, and hardly even move at all. Because the live show was a smash hit, the Australian studio behind the show, known as Global Creatures, created other successful shows and attractions, including an incredible live production of DreamWorks' How to Train Your Dragon, and even updating the Jurassic Park ride with Jurassic World and some new animatronics. It was also at this time that the Australian director, Daniel Kramer, contacted the company with the concept of bringing King Kong to the stage using the same technology made for Walking with Dinosaurs. The first photo and news of the show was from a leaked picture of a prototype animatronic Kong with some shelved Walking with Dinosaur animatronics displayed in the background. When I first saw this photo, my jaw dropped as the concept of a live arena show based on King Kong. The possibilities were endless in my imagination, with the concepts of a moving venture set across the arena, a curtained wall similar to the giant teeth in Walking with Dinosaurs, staged encounters and battles with the animatronic Kong and recycled dinosaurs from the Walking Show, and ending with Kong's final battle atop the Empire State Building, surrounded by fog and wired airplanes flying through the arena shooting down the massive beast. The actual show was nothing like that, for it would be a Broadway-style musical premiering in Sydney at the Malborne Theatre. Still, my optimism was very high, and seeing the original show go through its process online had me very intrigued. The concept of a full-scale animatronic Kong hadn't been done since 1976 with the original mannequin Kong designed by Carlo Rambaldi. Hell, even Universal cut costs of the completed bodied Kong in the old studio attractions by only having them from the waist up. Sure, the bridge Kong in Kongfrontation was a full-scale ape, but only functioned at the top half. The legs were just there for show. But still, given Kong's track record, a full-scale animatronic can be a tad expensive, with the big Kong used in the 1976 film costing $4 million out of a $12 million film budget, and only lasted on screen for about 10 seconds total, making it a total flop, despite it being used well in promotional material. So rather than creating a full-scale hydraulic Kong on par with the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, creators decided to go with a cheaper, if not lighter concept by having Kong be created as a marionette or a puppet on strings. And you all probably know where this is going. I know, how can I not make that joke? Still, the concept of a kaiju-sized Pinocchio was quite fascinating and had me intrigued on how they would pull off such a marvelous feat. But in terms of the concept of a musical, I just remember what the creators of The Simpsons said on the commentary for King Homer.
I have to admit, I did see King Kong on Broadway, and I was very disappointed. You know, after a half hour, I walked out.
In March 2013, King Kong, the Eighth Wonder of the World, premiered in Australia to wonder and some minor criticisms. The response alone was much similar to the release of the 1976 remake with great visuals but poor story. Huh, why does that sound so familiar to me? But despite that, it was a decent hit upon release, but sadly discontinued a few months later with the announcement of a move to Kong's true home in New York City. The problem, though, around that was finding the right space, and the show was constantly delayed due to finding the right theater that could hold that much equipment and technology. Hell, since life is imitating art, everyone asks how they got Kong back to New York, which the 1976 film proudly addressed. But how the hell can such a massive creature be moved into an overpopulated city, into a theater, mind you, completely unnoticed? I mean, even the styrofoam Kong used in the base of the World Trade Center in 1976 was spotted even before arrival. Well, much like that model, according to one of the Kong puppeteers, the creature was shipped to the theater in pieces and later constructed within the backstage to be used in rehearsals. Which brings us here to the Broadway Theater, and for the most part, it's a fair enough location that matches the original Kong.
I'm okay. I'm okay. That happens.
Don't be alarmed, ladies and gentlemen.
Although, to be fair, the Peter Jackson version had its show set closer to Times Square, but hey, money talks, I guess. I mean, in the original, it was quite a mob when the ape showed up the first time.
Well, you would come, and these tickets cost me $20.
Wow, that's actually a pretty good deal. In fact, I'm gonna order another set of tickets. I'm starting to realize why this is one of my most expensive episodes.
This jumped up little turd's gonna bankrupt us.
Okay, well, prices aside, given it's New York City, how's the rework of the show compared to Australia? Well, to be honest, both shows are a different take on the story, but given I've only seen the Broadway version, it's a little harder to compare. If anything, the Australian version sticks much closer to the original film while also taking elements from the Peter Jackson film. But for both shows, they more or less take much more from the public domain novelization by Dallas W. Lovelace. This is more likely because they don't want to avoid any copyright issues with any of the rights holders to the film versions. Hell, they're even selling a Broadway cover of the novel in the gift shop, so that's a plus for sure. This also wouldn't be the first nor last time Kong appeared on stage. In late 2019, another King Kong stage show premiered at the Maverick Theater in California and used a lot of tactics similar to the films, using rear screen projection and a man in a suit to achieve the vision of Kong appearing on stage. It was honestly pretty impressive, and if I can ever get a chance to review it, I definitely will. However, the Broadway version takes more from the novelization and actually gives certain characters a much different perspective, while also in a way modernizes it for the current show-going audience. Carl Denham probably has the least amount of changes, but we'll discuss it more in the negative aspects, which is mostly in the second act. However, for the most part, Denham comes off as a young and enthusiastic filmmaker, as well as having a sly sense of humor and a charismatic charm. Eric William Morris does a marvelous job chewing up the scenery with his bright-colored costume and with the adventurous spirit that so many actors before have portrayed. Also, for some reason, and I'm guessing it's because of the green vest, he kinda reminds me of the Riddler. The rest of the characters are pretty much mediocre, but slip into their iconic roles from the previous films. However, the real star of the show is, of course, Ann Darrow, played by Christiani Pitts, who in this version we actually learn her real name. And don't worry, it's not as disappointing as this.
Name?
Mario.
Last name?
Mario.
It's Mario and Luigi Mario.
Fun fact, that movie was actually shot in the same sound stages as King Kong Lives. But anyway, it turns out that her true name is Annabelle Dorset. Ann Darrow was just the name she picked for stardom. Well, it could have been worse. She could have had a sidekick name thrown in at the 11th hour.
Henceforth, you shall be known as Darth Vader.
You motherfucker! What? Give me the background on why! That's what I was waiting for! What the fuck?
So much wasted potential. And my god, does Christiani nail the part perfectly and really gives her all in every show. Not to mention, this is the first adaptation I've seen so far where the Jack Driscoll character doesn't even exist, which really surprised me. Now granted, he exists in the Australian version, however for Broadway, they more or less blend Jack into both the characters of Anne and Denham. The motive I guess they were going for is to make Anne much more of an independent person who didn't really need a Prince Charming to save her, and for the most part, it works quite well. Hell, the whole damsel in distress angle is something Anne is against in this version. In the story, Denham is begging her to scream for her life, but she actually refuses to play that part. Which today I understand, but back in the 1930s, that would not fly.
Scream it! Scream for your life!
No, I'm not doing that. Well then what the hell do we come here for? Oh hey look, a giant monkey. My bitch! But if you were gonna give her any relationship aside from Kong, it mostly falls into the friendship of Lumpy?
Be fair for me to know who you are?
Oh, people call me Lumpy on account of...
Fancy my porridge out of walnuts.
Now granted, they don't end up together, and they're just close friends by the end of the story, but Lumpy? Lumpy? Like, my god, this is the guy that Andy Serkis portrayed as a dirty ship's cook in the 2005 film. Although, to be fair, he also played Kong. Now, granted, in this version, they essentially made him more on par with Herb the cameraman, I guess. It's more explained in the novel, but either way, this seemed like a really odd choice. But other than that, how was her relationship with Kong? Well, like most high-end adaptations, it's honestly quite sweet and really emotional. Not to mention, Anne actually has some good one-liners with Kong. It actually gets a couple of good laughs from me.
The water's clean, but I'm not so sure your hands are. You give a gal a drink and you show her your apartment. Well, aren't you the lady killer? Not literally, I'm hoping.
The scenes between the two honestly felt pretty damn genuine and really worked on stage. Now, I know a lot of you might be wondering what I think of this change of Ann Darrow from a blonde white starlet to a down-on-her-luck actress of color in this adaptation.
Well, to be perfectly honest, guys, I think it's actually quite interesting.
Social justice weird.
Hear me out!
Look, let's be honest and truthful here, that nothing since the original has topped Fay Wray's iconic character. As much as I like Jessica Lange, Naomi Watts, Brie Larson, Linda Miller, and even Linda Hamilton, but that's quite a stretch, Fay Wray created that character. Okay, to be fair, it was based on the writer of the film, Ruth Rose, Ernest Schoetz's ex-wife, but regardless, Fay Wray made it her own, and she will always remain Kong's true love. Now, I'm not going to be one of those social justice warrior fuckwads who say this was for the better because it's time for change and evolution, but to be honest, I kinda like this change for this adaptation, and CHRISTIANI really gives an interesting perspective on the character, and comes off as charming and kind in this time period. I don't want to dwindle on it too much, but remember, this is still the early 1900s, and at the time, society was still getting used to equality of rights in non-white citizens, so the racism was still very much around at that time. In the original and other adaptations, and despite wanting to be the actress and find her place in the world, always had a feeling of not fitting into society as a whole. She was kind of like Belle in Beauty and the Beast. Everyone saw her as different and abnormal. So when Anne finds Kong, their bond is also a connection of common characterisms that the two don't belong in this society, which brings them closer together and makes the ending even more tragic. Even in the Peter Jackson film, the planes shoot Kong, despite knowing Anne is up there, making it much more dangerous for both of them. And that idea stems all the way back to 1996. So with a black actress taking on the lead, that common characterisms are even more apparent, if not stronger, in this version. And in that sense, I can really appreciate how emotional it was.
So yeah, despite the controversy, I actually thought it was an interesting perspective and a decent change. But for the love of Jesus Christ on a popsicle stick.
Don't even bring up the whole race symbolisms of the original film that so many professors and internet conspiracy theories whore out like Dwan bringing up Deep Throat!
Did you ever meet anyone before whose life was saved by Deep Throat?
I don't need more dark, depressing things to add to my Rule 34 imagery in King Kong Cometh!
The producers made a critical error in the 1976 version of King Kong by advertising a well-built black man to play Kong.
Man, they were really racially insensitive back in the 1970s.
This is no longer the 19th century. You can't just walk in and grab their island.
Thanks, Jack. I'll check that with the UN.
Well, now that I've gotten that glooming shadow out of the way, let's get to the highlights of the show with King Kong himself, and for the most part, the character can be described in this version as more, well, shadowed. Now that's not necessarily sounding like a bad thing. What I mean is that it actually is hard to read his expressions as a character and feels much more animalistic. In most film adaptations, you can read Kong's expressions as a character very easily due to the animation or actor involved in creating that character. In this version, I feel this is the first time I actually couldn't predict what Kong was thinking or feeling, which in a way made him feel more real, and much more of an animal than most adaptations. And that alone has to go to the puppeteers involved. The animatronic puppet is superb and really gets the emotion and strength across with the character. It takes all the previous attempts from Marcel Delgado, Carlo Rambaldi, and Bob Gurr and perfects it 1,000-fold. This is the pinnacle of all their efforts brought together by the very talented crew of effects professionals. Kong's feet are controlled by hooded stunt team, and his facial movements are operated by radio control in a dark room. Even his vocals are provided by an actor really giving his all, which has been a staple of Kong animatronics since the King Kong encounter. Hell, for the company, they actually improved some of the facial expressions in the animatronic in Skull Island Reign of Kong at Universal Orlando. The only downside, as most pointed out, is the lack of fur on the puppet itself.
But to those complainers, I say two things. Number one, this is meant to be a giant marionette, and therefore as light as possible to achieve swift-like movements. And number two,
that much fur is heavy as hell. For example, the fur on Kong in the Universal encounter ended up weighing in at 600 pounds, and that was only half the creature.
You try putting that much fur in a full-size Kong and you'll end up with a $4 million mannequin that lasts for 10 seconds.
This will cost the corporation billions.
So yeah, while the fur is missed, they could have at least given more of a black color scheme on the foam. But I guess they took the word silverback gorilla very literal. But altogether, it makes the character that much more powerful on stage. In fact, one scene that really threw me off guard was the iconic scene where Kong is presented on stage. And I mean that in storytelling ways, not literally. Cause at that point, there's a strange, surreal experience that we as an audience are now part of the story. It's very subtle, but it reminded me a lot of being on the retro rides at Universal Studios. It's a moment where the tables turn, and at that point, I felt in all honesty that King Kong, for the first time on display standing bipedal at 50 feet tall, felt 100% real. And I didn't need my fictional dimensional transporter for this shit. This was the moment that the eighth wonder of the world was indeed a wonder.
Now that's a pretty damn impressive way to sell the show in a nutshell, but what about the production design and special effects?
And aside from the characters and animatronic, we gotta remember this is a musical, so let's discuss the technical aspects and musical sequences. While I will say the first major plus of this show is that the production design is absolutely top-notch. Right away in the opening act, 10 seconds in, I was immediately sold with how they handled the sets in this. While the foreground sets are standard stage pieces given the space to work with, the highlight of the show's production design comes from the use of the technique that was pioneered and perfected in the original 1933 film with the use of rear screen projection to achieve the expansion of the world. And it works beautifully. The scene that sticks out the most is the transition to the scenes aboard the SS Wanderer, which, note, the Venture was changed in the novelization and presented in Kong Skull Island. While the main ship setting is on the bow, it makes up for it with the consistency of rear screen projection of the CGI sea environment, and it feels like we traveled from New York to Skull Island in real time. The rear screen projection really works here, and with the advancements of 4K technology, it is absolutely marvelous here. In fact, rear screen projection technology is even used more so today. For example, The Mandalorian, some of the sets didn't even use green screen, they just used 4K projection, and it's hardly even noticeable. Honestly, it beats out any green screen that George Lucas did 10 years prior.
Oh, so we spent $100,000 that we didn't need to spend.
Now, going back to the controversy surrounding the casting as Anne as a black actress, you might be wondering how the show adapts the natives of Skull Island. Well, surprisingly enough, or to some of your unexpected disappointment, the natives, let alone the Wall of Skull Island, aren't presented this time around.
What?
They can't do that.
Yeah, I know. How the hell does this adaptation not include one of the key reasons for Kong's majesty, given he's presented as a vicious godlike figure? Well, to shoo off any worries some hardcore fans might have, I'll explain it in two ways. First off, remember how I said Kong is more of a shadow here? Well, that can also be explained figuratively as well, since he feels much more like a godlike spirit than a god of fear or monstrosity. Second, if the natives are out, how do they present Anne to Kong if not as a sacrifice? Well, to make up for it, the production design gave us a clever representation of Skull Island by having its environments and jungles literally be alive. In fact, some who can describe Skull Island in this version are the crew at Weta Workshop who worked on the 2005 film.
It's the kind of place that if you landed in the 30s on that island, you'd have maybe 2 or 3 hours up your sleeve, you know, and then it'd be over. The island would eat you alive.
Not to mention, with the amount of space available on set, building a full-scale wall on a theater stage isn't really possible here, especially given this production is very limited. Plus, I think Robot Chicken really hit the nail in the coffin when it comes to the giant wall of Skull Island.
Excuse me, but if your people built this wall to keep King Kong out, well then why build a door large enough for him to get through? For that matter, Kong's a giant monkey. I mean, why can't he just climb over the wall?
Yeah, in this version, they show that the jungle itself can literally consume or devour you if you stay away for too long. And there's a scene in particular where the crew enter the jungle as Anne is caught in a vine trap which causes her to scream and summon Kong from the jungle depths in a very terrifying fashion. It's honestly a clever move from a directing standpoint, and I gotta give credit to the writer Jack Thorne and director Drew McOine for pulling off what seemed like a difficult task in terms of storytelling.
No, Jack, you can't do this to me. I have a beginning, but I need a middle and an end. I gotta have something to shoot.
Now, much like the 1976 film, some might be sadly disappointed that despite being based on the original film and novelization, that no dinosaurs are presented in this version, and some might be wondering why they didn't recycle some of the animatronics from Walking with Dinosaurs, as mentioned earlier. Well, to the defense of the production, one of the puppeteers stated that given the amount of space in the theater, it would have been impossible to hold all the creatures presented in the source material backstage, let alone 2.
2? What do you mean 2?
Yeah. You guys think I'm kidding, right? You think Kong's the only creature in the show, but no. I got footage and photos to prove it. It's actually a pretty solid effect.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this was actually something I didn't see coming. When the first glimpses of the giant cobra came into frame of the stage, I was a little taken back, given even in the 1976 film, no film after dared try and do the serpent fight with Kong for a long ass time, because I'll come out in a minute, the snake fight in the 76 film, despite being fun, didn't look that impressive. It didn't help that the prop snake itself barely worked, and production even considered hiring a little person in a smaller scale Kong suit to fight a real boa constrictor. But in this production, it was actually very impressive, and I was completely surprised how well the scene came out. They used the same marionette technique used for Kong for this lighter creature, and the fight scene itself was actually very entertaining to watch on stage. In fact, the way the cobra itself was killed off was honestly quite comedic and awesome at the same time, using a classic joke only seen in cartoons to get the damn thing off stage. But overall, it's a great fight scene, despite the colors looking like you're stepping into a laser tag arena. Now, in terms of the post-Skull Island scenes, like I said, the New York designs do really well, especially with Kong on the loose. But of course, it all comes down to the iconic Empire State Building sequence, and it might be due to the fact that the creature is really there, but when Kong makes his final stand, it's actually quite an emotional roller coaster and had me choked up a little by the time he falls, especially with the incredible emotional performance and dialogue from Christiani, whose voice really presents a powerful presence to rival with Kong.
Look at them. Everyone watching us. Petrified of you. Petrified for me, but they don't know. They don't know I'm not scared of anything anymore! Woo! Woo! Oh, no. Okay, a little scared of falling.
And speaking of voices, that brings us to the music and songs in the show. Now, to be fair, I've tried to listen to both scores from Australia and New York, and while both have their strong points, it's really hard to decide which show has the better music. I guess I'll start with the opening numbers. Hunting Season in Australia has a very Frank Sinatra feel to it, with the show introducing Carl Denham searching high and low for a leading lady in his latest picture.
Search the city high and low, and when I see her, I will know that secret magic, X and Y, that cinematic magnet for the eye.
However, I think the opening on Broadway is a lot stronger, with Christiani Pitt's one-hit wonder Queen of New York.
Broadway on path never asks permission. No man to trample on Anne's ambition.
Nobody knows she's the queen of New York.
I'm taking the throne. I'm gonna be the queen of New York.
With an opening epic chant and Anne's search for a job, it shows the progression that the city is rising with the construction of the Empire State Building, and gives a real sense of world building. Kinda pun intended. Now, some of the tracks from the Australia show are gonna have to be cut from the comparisons, but some are worth mentioning, such as What's It Gonna Take, in which some of the tracks were written by Toy Story 2's tearjerker When She Loved Me, Sarah McLachlan.
How do I become somebody new? How do I begin to make this happen?
Hey, if she can kill the joy of watching TV at home, I'm sure she'll do wonders on stage.
Hi, I'm Sarah McLachlan, and I'm here to fuck up your entire day.
There's another track that is pointless in this comparison, known as Special Effects. Yeah, that's a bad nod. Where we see Anne and whoa, honey, put some pants on!
Holy shit.
So baby, flip on that projector. I'm a special effect. Don't need no story or director, just the face is perfect.
I mean, I know Carl Denham was looking in the burlesque theaters for a potential girl, but I didn't need to actually see it. I mean, for God's sakes, what filmmaker would cast overly sexualized women for a film set on a mysterious island? That doesn't count, it's a porno!
We are not lancing a hemorrhoid here, we're replacing a heart.
I mean, Carl Denham at least had the decency to take a woman for something to eat!
You wouldn't happen to be a size 4 by any chance?
The next next comparison is with the song in which our heroes climb through the vines of Skull Mountain with In the Face of Forever, performed by Jack Driscoll, and The World, performed by Carl Denham. Jack's number is more of a melody that a band like Coldplay would perform, and for the character, I can see it as a rise in strength, but nothing too special. Huh, why does that sound so familiar?
Yeah, I'm free. I'm free falling.
Whereas Carl's piece is more adventurous, and despite given his camera is out and represents Denham's choice to capture Kong alive, to be honest, both tracks are kind of hit and miss, so I'll say they're tied for very different reasons.
And he's mine, climb right to the top of the world. I'm knocking him off his throne. I'm dragging salvation home.
Now this is where we get more complicated, my friends, with the song performed on both coasts, Full Moon Lullaby. This is the key point in the show where Anne and Kong begin to show their compassion and love for one another, as Anne sings to Kong in his lair as he lays resting from the battle with the Cobra.
Wash it all away.
As a side note, this is something that stems back to Peter Jackson's 1996 draft in which Anne sings a lullaby to Kong to help tame the beast and to send him peace as he falls from the Empire State Building. Seeing the concept finally represented visually is actually a very sweet moment on stage. Given reading it in the original scripts came off kinda goofy. Esther Hannaforth's take is very soothing and relaxing to listen to, and you can feel how much it calms Kong into a peaceful sleep. Christiani Pitt's version, while a good cover of the original, unfortunately feels a little overblown. The way I can describe it is imagine watching two versions of Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom of the Opera. There's the iconic Broadway production,
The Phantom of the Opera is there.
simple and to the point. And there's the Joel Schumacher Hollywood film adaptation. Film always has the advantage yet the right to be more over the top because they have a greater space for visuals, storytelling, and acting, and unfortunately the Broadway version tires this method, and it doesn't work as well, even with Christiani giving it her all. Sort of a tough call, but I am gonna have to go with the Australian version. It's just more soothing and gets the point across better. This song also reminds me of that musical number from Rugrats in Paris with the Reptar show.
He's no ordinary monster. He's a lizard with a heart of gold.
It's funny how in the Australian version there's more songs in the first act, and in the Broadway version there's more songs in the second act. And to be fair, the New York version has the advantage with tracks like It's Man, which shows Denham's motives and plans to showcase Kong, selling tickets to the crowds in New York.
His name is Kong. Kong. One syllable, that's it, you can't go wrong. Kong. Rolls off the tongue. Kong. King Kong. 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 Yeah.
It's pretty catchy and has a fun beat to it. Okay, one last comparison, because if we look at each aspect, we'll be here all day. And funny enough, it's comparing the tracks used during Kong's rampage in the city. I'll start off with the New York version titled Broadway Nightmare. It has an auto-tune that unfortunately is really distracting and kind of puts you off when you want to see Kong wreck shit, not to mention it doesn't flow well with the pacing of the story. However, I'll come out and say it that my favorite track from the Australian version is the song Get Happy. It flows much better in pace and works better in the story, sounding like a 1930s version of a Beyonce track. So yeah, in this final round, point goes to the Australian version. But honestly, both shows have their strong points and songs and are pretty much equally matched.
Now, with all that is said and good, is there anything negative to say about the show?
Well, to be honest, there's not much to talk about here. I know most hardcore fans of the story might nitpick all the changes made from the original film, but the changes in this version are actually really good for the most part. I mean, the production design, effects, music, and acting is all pretty solid. Aside from some of the character changes halfway through the show. Okay, well, if I have to go into details, some of the characters you liked in the first act actually take a complete 180 in the second. Most notably Carl Denham. The first act of this show, he comes off as a charming, enthusiastic, and optimistic character, as well as being bright, full of energy, and honestly really funny.
And Darrow the Sparrow has the appetite of a wheelbarrow.
Now.
Why, are they getting close?
Who's they? What's the rush?
He hasn't told you?
Details, mere details. Let's set sail! Our leading lady. They don't know whether to fall at your knees or throw you overboard.
But the second act, he becomes a totally different character. And I know what you're thinking. That's every version of Carl Denham becoming a selfish asshole after capturing Kong. Yeah, but here's the thing. We saw the progression of what made him snap and go nuts at that point. In the '76 film, the reason was simple. No oil, no business. So that made Fred Wilson want to capture Kong.
You shouldn't have radioed New York. You were bringing in the big one.
The big one. Jesus. Who says I ain't gonna?
In the 2005 film, Carl Denham's camera is destroyed. He could have just gotten the footage of Kong and walked off with a masterpiece. But no film, capture Kong.
You got a boat full of chloroform we could put to good use.
You want to trap the ape?
Isn't that what you do? Live animal capture? I heard you were the best.
Even in the original, despite less reasoning why, Denham thinks capturing Kong would make more money than a feature film.
We came here to get a moving picture, and we found something worth more than all the movies in the world. What?
Now, the original could be the biggest defense on the reasoning why, but here's the thing. That was the 1930s. That kind of mindset in today's storytelling would not fly, and as Jack Driscoll said in the original,
Why, you're crazy.
So even if you were to present it on stage, it would be highly unbelievable. Any sane man would want to get off that island as soon as possible. It adds a bit more realism to the fantasy. I've always found the current incarnations from the 70s onward gave a reason for the Denham character to capture Kong, and it's more so out of desperation. And since a lot of people have brought it up as a critical concern, I might as well talk about it now. I know a lot of people don't like Carl Denham always being a bad guy in later incarnations. And to be honest, I agree. I mean, for God's sakes, I'm guilty of this current cliche myself. At least I established early on that the guy was an asshole. They don't always need a human villain in these movies, but there is a perfect balance of a protagonist and an antagonist in almost every incarnation and delivered by some pretty fantastic actors. For example, if you want a good guy Carl Denham, you can go to the original Robert Armstrong performance, and, I can't believe I'm saying this, even the mighty Kong had some good redemption by having Dudley Moore's performance as charming, likable, and a character to root for. In fact, he was the best thing in the whole damn movie.
And I'm about to make a truly epic film.
On stage, though, not only is the why on his decision either vague or unexplained, but it's not even earned.
Oh, God. Only I could have just saved a few feet of film. That beast is a king.
If I hadn't seen it with my own two eyes, I'd have never believed it existed.
What did you just say?
I want us to find Anne.
You said you gotta see it to believe it. That's what you said.
Did I?
Opportunity.
That's it? That's all they did?
There's a scene where Anne and him have an argument, and Denham is all of a sudden becoming a cold, cruel voice of reality, even to the point of being passive-aggressive towards Anne, becoming very hands-on at one point. It comes out of nowhere, and it feels really out of character.
I mean, it's nothing wrong with the actor. He does a fine job with the material, but the character is less Robert Armstrong and more... Yeah, there's a bit of a PC push in this show.
There's also relevance, it seems to me, in this play to the Me Too movement, right? That you're not a damsel in distress.
She doesn't even know how to let a man save her, which is shocking for all the men in the play. She's like, I don't need you, and actually, I don't know how to need you.
I'm just an actor with a gun.
who's lost his motivation.
It just feels very out of place and mean-spirited in a show with a much more adventurous tone. If this was something like the 1976 film or the 1996 draft, it would fit better, but it's here that the subtle real-life messages felt a little forced. But even with that minor issue, the rest of the messages are still subtle and not too obvious, and the show itself is pretty spectacular.
So overall, for any King Kong fan, I'd say go check it out while it lasts.
As a stage production of the iconic story brought to life through film, it does its job properly and with impressive, if not wondrous feats. Filled with outstanding production design, wonderful acting, catchy musical numbers, and with some overly impressive special effects, animatronics, and puppetry, the King Kong musical takes all the works from the previous films before it and brings it to life on stage like no other musical before it. It's a high leap in theater productions, and rightfully so. Hell, I'll even put it on par with Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. Yeah, you heard me, and I actually liked that show. Is it as good as a stage show? Abso-goddamn-lutely. But in comparison, is it as good as the movies? No. But it's still an A+ performance with a lot of effort and talents involved, coming in at a good 8.5 out of 10. Now, unfortunately, the show has since moved from New York and is actually making its way to other parts of the world. It's a good musical and worth checking out wherever it is, and overall, the 8th wonder of the world has finally become a reality. Well guys, that about wraps up this season of the BigJackFilms reviews and the King Kong reviews. I hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. If you have any suggestions for any other King Kong related material or films you want us to discuss in the future, feel free to send us requests by supporting us on Patreon. However, join us in the next season to see what new adventures we'll take with the giant gorilla god of both Skull Island and New York City, as well as other films I plan to cover in the future.
But for now, guys, I gotta pay respect to an old friend. Oh, dude, I am never using the FTT to transport to real-life locations again. I'd rather take an airplane.
Alright, I'm all freshened up. Ending the season. Now to move on to next year. Oh my god! Luscious space? Hardwood floors? What the hell happened? Son of a bitch!
Hello, Sean from JTISREBORN here. How can I help you?
Hi, care to explain the Extreme Makeover Home Edition I'm looking at right now?
What are you talking about there, buddy?
Well, I got a long-term contract with TLC. What do you think? My room changed! The Hollywood side is gone, everything's shifted around. What the hell happened?
Oh, that. Well, we figured you were in need of an upgrade, so while you were out and about doing your thing, we decided to go ahead and upgrade your entire review space just for you.
That it? No other mind-blowing modifications I should know about?
Nope, the rest of the place is practically the same.
Well, I guess I could get used to this. I mean, we're living in unprecedented times, so who knows what the future holds?
So, what's next?
I don't know. But maybe we can hope for something a bit more brighter. Thanks for your help.
Oh, the bill's $5,000.
Well, guys, welcome to our new reviewing location. I hope you enjoy it, and I can't wait to show off more next year. So until the next video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. This is BigJackFilms, signing off. I should really put more security in this place.